What's this about people on universal credit being asked to pay back some of the money that they've been given? Tell us more about that.
It looks like an administrative cock-up, actually, rather than anything nasty, but it will come as a shock to many people. What happened apparently was that before claiming universal credit, you used to actually go along and have a face-to-face interview to find out whether or not you were actually, whether you could apply for it or not. And of course, the top-up has now disappeared as well. But what appears to have happened here is that people just got it. They didn't have a face-to-face interview, and now the DWP, the Department for Work and Pensions, is going back to these people and saying, well, we really need to find out if you can actually apply for this credit, and if not, we're going to ask for it back. So it looks like a cock-up more than a scandal. But I would advise people to either get in touch with the DWP. We're aware of this thanks to the charity CPAG, Child Poverty Action Group, which started many years ago. It might be worth having a look on their website as well, just to check to see what you ought to do if you feel as though you may be getting a letter, or indeed have already got one. And actually, what's also happening, and this is pretty direct, is that the DWP has in fact been getting in touch with employers to try to take money from people's salaries if they feel as though they're getting this and they're not eligible for it. So it's a question really of checking first of all. It looks like a cock-up more than anything else.
Say cock-up rather than conspiracy. I was going to say that, Mike, but it hinges on the original claimants not supplying the right ID. Is that correct?
Well, the fact is that what happened was, because of the pandemic, people didn't go face to face, as they normally would, to find out if they're eligible and provide their identity documents and all the rest of it, driving license, whatever it may be. And so this is a gap here, and DWP have actually been looking at this and finding that some people they don't feel have responded to a further request for an identity check. It gets very complicated, but basically my thought is, check with DWP or indeed the charity that revealed this in the first place to see where you are in the eligibility stakes.
Michael, I want to take you on to this next story. The Bank of England is saying, obviously, lots of us now working from home, not myself and Polly, but the Bank of England is saying women who work mostly from home are risk seeing their careers suffer. Tell us a bit more about that.
Well, I'm not sure about this, actually. I don't know why it's particularly women. I would have thought it's anybody, quite honestly. But let's stick with the facts of the story. This is Catherine Mann, who's a member of the Monetary Policy Committee at the Bank of England. This is a woman who, along with others, decides on the monetary policy, which the Bank of England actually does. And she was talking to a group of business people the other night, and she made this comment about women actually, because they are at home, it's not the same as actually being in the office and the interaction and all the rest of it. I think it's just not just a women's issue. I think it's a people issue, quite honestly. I've always maintained that it's fine working from home, but the fact is you do actually need, and at the beginning of your career, to be in an office, because that's where you start to grow up. That's where you start to find out what the work's about. That's where you rub shoulders with people you wouldn't normally meet. And there's nothing like a face-to-face rather than just being isolated and being at home. So I'm certain it does affect women. I think what she may be also alluding to is the fact that all these months of isolation and not going into the office have actually shifted the terms of, for example, looking after the family. And it may be that, women feel as though they need to stay at home to do that, rather than having this work-life balance that one would encourage them to have. So I feel it's not just women, but for the sake of this story, this is what Catherine Mann is actually saying. I think it applies to everybody. I think offices are essential.
I couldn't agree with you more, Michael. I don't see why this is a particularly a women's story. Catherine Mann talking about, nevertheless, those spontaneous office conversations, important for recognition. I suppose the Americans call it the water cooler conversations, applicable to men just as women, surely.
Absolutely. And I think also, I don't know about you, but when I started in the media business, I used to look at other people and copy those I thought were doing quite well and avoid the mistakes that other people had made. I did have an advantage because I was much younger than they were, as you all do when you start. So there's this panoply of work experience, which you just don't get at home. And absolutely the water cooler is the most important one. In fact, here's the thing for you, Polly. You may not know this, but there was a competition early in the pandemic. I think it was HSBC saying, what would you most like to create virtually, to get off it? And they said, we'll have a virtual water cooler, please. I think it's very sensible.
Michael, another thing that we saw during the pandemic, as well as working from home, was people doing DIY projects in their home.
Not me.
Not me either. But lots of people did. And Kingfisher, the home improvement company, have revealed a jump in sales, haven't they?
Yes, they have. I mean, the trick with B&Q and Screwfix is that both of whom I happen to use, and not just for the wonky shelves behind me, which happen to be perfectly straight, and I didn't do them actually. But there we are. That's a different thing. But it's the trick with these things is go to an old bloke in there who's actually wandering around, one of the staff, and say, what I want is X, Y, and Z. Can you give me a hint? They're extremely helpful. This is what DIY has actually shown, and this is what the pandemic showed as well. Do you remember? I do certainly. Queuing to get into these places at the height, right at the beginning of the pandemic, when social isolation was at its highest. And I think that Screwfix and B&Q are reaping the benefits of this. And certainly all the expectations are that when Kingfisher gives its trading report, its latest one at the end of November, profits are going to be up again. Good luck to them. If they're supplying a service, and it's what we actually want to do. DIY has actually not only meant that people have been improving their homes because they've had the time to do it, but also some people have not moved, and so it's actually put a bit of a dent in house sales. I mean, if you're improving your home, no bad thing, adds value if you're doing it properly, of course.